You think hitting rock bottom is being humiliated in front of 200 people? No. The real bottom is realizing they have survived on your work for years while still calling you worthless. I left my father's retirement party tonight with an untouched glass of champagne and a decision that will crumble his empire. I am not just leaving the family. I am taking the one thing holding them up. My name is Aurora Sanders. For 32 years, I had been trained to be invisible. I was the furniture in the corner, the smudge on the lens, the necessary but regrettable footnote in the grand biography of Gordon Hale. But tonight, at the Harborcrest Society Hall in Savannah, I was finally going to be seen. The venue was suffocatingly opulent. It was the kind of place where the air conditioning smelled like old money and gardenias, and the floorboards were polished to a mirror shine that reflected the sins of the people walking on them. 200 guests filled the room. These were not friends. They were sharks in bespoke suits and silk dresses. I saw the Port Authority directors, the banking tycoons, the logistics magnates, and the high-priced lawyers who kept them all out of prison. They were the heartbeat of Georgia's coastal economy. And tonight, they were all here to kiss the ring of my father. Gordon Hale was retiring, or at least, that was the official narrative. He stood on the raised stage, bathed in a golden spotlight that seemed to love him almost as much as he loved himself. He looked every inch the patriarch. Silver hair perfectly coiffed, a tuxedo that cost more than most people earned in 6 months, and that winning, predatory smile that could charm a snake out of a basket. I stood near the back, by the heavy velvet curtains, holding a glass of champagne I had no intention of drinking. The bubbles had gone flat. I watched him work the room from the podium. He was telling the story of Hale Cargo and Freight, spinning a tale of grit and determination that conveniently omitted the ruthlessness and the bodies buried, metaphorically speaking, under the foundation. "We built this company on trust," Gordon bellowed, his voice booming through the high-quality sound system. "We built it on family values, on the idea that a man's word is his bond, and his legacy is his children." A polite ripple of applause moved through the crowd. I saw Serena, my stepmother, sitting in the front row. She was clapping with her hands held high, her chin tilted up to catch the light, performing the role of the adoring wife. Next to her sat Lance, her son, my stepbrother. He looked bored, checking his watch, probably calculating how soon he could inherit the title of CEO and drive the company into the ground. And then Gordon pivoted. This was the part of the night I had been waiting for. The family tribute. "But a man cannot build an empire alone," Gordon said, his voice dropping to a theatrical, emotional register. "He does it for his blood, for the future." He gestured grandly toward the table where Serena and Lance sat. My wife, Serena, my rock, and Lance, my son, who has earned his MBA and is ready to take the helm, bringing fresh vision to our operations. The applause was louder this time, enthusiastic. Lance stood up and gave a little wave, looking smug. He had never worked a real day in his life. He thought logistics was about moving boxes. He did not understand it was about moving data. "And, of course," Gordon continued, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on me in the shadows, "we have Aurora." The spotlight swung. It hit me with the physical force of a slap. I did not flinch. I had practiced this moment in the mirror of my studio apartment for a week. I kept my spine straight, my chin level, and my expression unreadable. Gordon chuckled, a low rumble that invited the audience to share in the joke. It was a sound I knew well. It was the sound he made before he dismantled someone's self-esteem. "Aurora," he said, shaking his head with a mock-affectionate sigh. "My wild card. She decided that higher education was not for her. No degree, no big career." He leaned into the microphone, his voice dripping with that poisonous blend of pity and condescension. "But we love her anyway, don't we, folks? Even if she is still figuring out what she wants to be when she grows up, it is not easy finding your way when you prefer the scenic route to hard work. But hey, someone has to keep the couch warm." The room erupted. It was not a gasp of shock. It was laughter. 200 of the most powerful people in Savannah threw their heads back and laughed. They laughed because Gordon Hale told them it was funny. They laughed because, to them, I was exactly what he said I was. Uneducated, worthless, a 32-year-old woman living off her father's generosity. A leech. I looked around the room. I saw the smirks. I saw the pitying glances from the wives, the dismissive sneers from the businessmen. They saw a failure. They saw a woman who had never accomplished anything of note. Gordon was beaming. He had done it. He had asserted his dominance one last time before his retirement, reminding everyone that while he was a benevolent king, his kingdom had a jester. He had used my humiliation to polish his own halo of tolerance. Look at what a good father I am. His smile said, I support this deadbeat daughter. The laughter began to die down, settling into a comfortable hum of amusement. They expected me to look down. They expected me to blush, to cry, or perhaps to offer a weak, embarrassed wave. That was the script. I had followed that script for 12 years. Tonight, I burned the script. I stepped forward, just one step, but it brought me fully into the light. I did not ask for a microphone. I did not need one. My voice had been trained in boardrooms that these people did not even know existed. I knew how to project. I raised my glass of flat champagne. Cheers, Dad, I said. The room went quiet. It was not the silence of respect. It was the silence of confusion. The jester was speaking. I looked directly at him. I did not look at the guests. I locked eyes with the man who had dismissed my entire existence because I did not follow his outdated map of the world. To the empire you built, I said, my voice clear, steady, and sharp as a diamond cutter. And to the reality of who actually keeps it standing. Gordon frowned. The smile flickered on his face. He was trying to read me, but he was looking at a book he had never bothered to open. And to everyone here, I continued, turning slightly to address the room. My gaze swept over the bankers and the lawyers, the people who signed the contracts I secretly approved, the people whose logistical nightmares I solved while they slept. Laugh while you can, because this is the last time any of you will see me. I did not wait for a reaction. I did not wait for the confusion to turn into anger. I simply turned my back. I dropped the champagne glass. I did not throw it. I just opened my fingers and let it fall. It hit the hardwood floor with a shatter that sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. Crystal exploded. Champagne splashed onto the polished shoes of a port director standing nearby. He jumped back, but I was already moving. My heels struck the floor with a rhythmic, military precision. Click, click, click. The sound echoed off the vaulted ceiling. It was the sound of a countdown. I walked down the center aisle, the red sea of guests parting for me, not out of reverence, but out of sheer shock. I could feel their eyes on my back. I could feel Gordon's rage radiating from the stage like heat from a furnace. He was losing control of his narrative, and for a man like Gordon Hale, that was worse than death. I pushed through the heavy double doors and into the cool, marble-floored lobby of the Society Hall. The air here was quieter. Free of the toxicity of the ballroom, I walked toward the exit, my pace unhurried. I was not running away. I was leaving. There is a difference. Aurora, stop! The shriek came from behind me. I did not stop, but I slowed down just enough to let them catch up. I knew they would come. They could not help themselves. Serena came first, her heels clattering frantically on the marble. She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my skin with surprising strength. Her face, usually a mask of Botoxed calm, was twisted in a rictus of panic. "What do you think you are doing?" she hissed, her voice low so the valet staff outside would not hear. "You are embarrassing us. You are ruining the night. Go back in there and laugh it off. Right now." I looked at her hand on my arm. Then I looked at her face. "Let go of me, Serena. You ungrateful little..." "Serena." Gordon's voice was a growl. He came striding out of the ballroom, his face flushed a dark, dangerous red. He did not run. He marched. He stopped 3 feet from me, looming, using his height to intimidate. It was a tactic that had worked when I was 20. It did not work now. "You get back in there," Gordon ordered. He pointed a finger at the ballroom doors. "You get back in there. You apologize for the glass. And you sit down. Do you have any idea who is in that room? Do you have any idea how much damage you just did to my image?" "Your image," I repeated. I let a small, dry laugh escape. "Always the image, never the reality." "The reality is that you are a disappointment," Gordon spat. The charm was gone. The warm father act had evaporated the moment the audience was gone. This was the real Gordon. "I gave you a roof. I gave you an allowance. I let you live in my world despite you having nothing to offer it. And this is how you repay me? With a tantrum?" "An allowance," I said. "You mean the money you sent that I returned every month for the last 8 years? Or did you never check the bank statements? Dad, did you just assume I was taking it?" Gordon blinked. He looked genuinely confused. He clearly had no idea. He had probably told his accountant to send the checks and never thought about it again. "I do not care about your little rebellions," Gordon said, dismissing the fact with a wave of his hand. "You are uneducated. You are worthless in this world without my name attached to you. Now, for the last time, go back inside." I looked at him. I really looked at him. I saw the fear behind the anger. He was terrified of looking weak. He was terrified that the 200 people inside were whispering about him. He had no idea that the real threat was standing right in front of him, wearing a dress she bought with her own money, holding the keys to his destruction. "No," I said. "Excuse me?" I said no. I took a step closer to him. "You stood on that stage and you called me worthless. You told them I was uneducated. You told them I was nothing." "Because it is the truth," Serena interjected shrilly. "Is it?" I tilted my head. "You think a degree is the only way to learn. Dad, you think because I did not sit in a lecture hall, I was not studying?" "You were waiting tables," Gordon scoffed. "You were fixing cars. You were wasting your life." "I was learning," I said softly. "I was learning how systems work. I was learning how supply chains break. I was learning how to negotiate, how to leverage, and how to spot a company that is bleeding money because its leadership is too arrogant to modernize." Gordon rolled his eyes. "I do not have time for your delusions. You cut me out of your life a long time ago. Dad," I said, my voice hardening. "You made me invisible. You thought that if you ignored me, I would disappear. But you forgot one thing about invisible people." "And what is that?" he sneered. "We see everything," I said. "And we can touch things without you ever knowing we were there. Tonight, I did not just break a glass. I broke the silence. I just said out loud what you were too scared to admit. You do not know me. You have never known me." I turned to the valet who was standing by the open door of my car, a sleek black sedan that looked nothing like the beat-up compact car Gordon thought I drove. "Get in the car," Gordon shouted, realizing I was actually leaving. "If you leave now, Aurora, do not bother coming back. I will cut you off completely. Not a cent." I paused with my hand on the door handle. I looked back at them one last time. Serena was trembling with rage. Gordon looked like he was about to have a stroke. "You cannot cut off someone who does not need you," I said. "And as for the money, you are going to need it more than I do." I slid into the driver's seat and slammed the door. The sound was solid, final. I did not look in the rearview mirror as I drove away. I did not need to see them standing on the curb, impotent and furious. I knew exactly what they looked like. I had spent 12 years memorizing their arrogance. I drove out of the long, winding driveway of the Harbor Crest Society Hall, the tires crunching softly on the gravel. Once I hit the main road, the silence of the car wrapped around me like a protective blanket. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from adrenaline. It was done. The bridge was burned. I merged onto the highway, the lights of Savannah blurring past me. My phone, mounted on the dashboard, lit up with a notification. It was a single text message. The name on the screen was Ethan Cole, my chief financial officer. I glanced at the preview of the message. Renewal contract from Hale Cargo Freight just arrived. The terms are desperate. They are panicking. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. Gordon thought the night was about his retirement. He thought it was about his legacy. He had no idea that the uneducated, worthless daughter he had just mocked was the owner of Black Harbor Optimization Group, the consulting firm that had been secretly managing his entire logistics network for the last 3 years. He thought he was the king. He did not realize he was just a tenant in a castle I owned. "Panic away, Dad," I whispered to the empty car. "The lesson has just begun." To understand why I shattered a glass of champagne and walked out of my father's life tonight, you have to understand that I did not leave a family. I left a performance 12 years ago. The Hale family was the gold standard of the Georgia coast. If you drove past our estate on the bluff, with its white pillars and manicured magnolias, you would see a portrait of American success. We had the sprawling lawn where charity galas were hosted. We had the luxury cars parked in the circular driveway. We had the connections that spanned from the Savannah docks to the state senate. From the outside, we were untouchable. Inside, we were suffocating. The house had changed the day my mother died. I was 10 years old. I do not remember the funeral clearly. It is just a blur of black umbrellas and heavy hands patting my shoulder. But I remember the nights before she passed. I remember the smell of antiseptic and fading lavender perfume. Most of all, I remember her hands. They were thin, almost translucent, but she had a grip that defied her illness. She would squeeze my hand before I went to sleep. A desperate, anchoring pressure, as if she was trying to transfer the last of her strength into my bones. She never said much in those final days, but that grip said everything. It said, "Hold on." 2 years later, Gordon Hale decided he had held on to grief long enough. He remarried. Serena arrived like a renovation project, eager to modernize and sanitize. She brought with her a son, Lance, who was a year older than me and possessed the kind of unearned confidence that only mediocre men seem to master. Suddenly, the house was full again. The silence was replaced by Serena's high-pitched laughter and the thud of Lance's basketball against the garage door. The new family had formed, and it solidified around me like concrete, trapping me in the negative space. I was not abused in the way people usually imagine. There were no locked closets, no raised fists, no shouting matches. It was far more sophisticated than that. It was a violence of omission. They killed me with invisibility. It started at the dinner table. In the Hale household, dinner was mandatory, a nightly ritual where Gordon held court. I quickly learned that there was a hierarchy to the conversation. Gordon spoke first, usually about the business or a round of golf. Serena spoke second, agreeing with Gordon or complaining about the help. Lance spoke third, usually bragging about a video game or a vague achievement at school. I was not fourth. I was not on the list. I would sit there, staring at the roast chicken, waiting for a pause in the breath, a tiny gap where I could insert a sentence. "I got an A on my history project today," I said one evening when I was 14. The silence that followed was not hostile. It was simply indifferent. It was the kind of silence you give a radio that has been left on in another room. Gordon cut a piece of meat, chewed thoughtfully, and then looked at Lance. "How is the football tryout coming along, son? Coach says you have the build for linebacker." Lance puffed out his chest, flashing a grin. "Yeah, I think I'm going to make varsity. The coach likes my hustle." "That is what I like to hear," Gordon beamed, pointing his fork at Lance. "Hustle, drive, that is the Hale way." "That is wonderful, Lance," Serena added, pouring more wine. "You are going to be a star." I sat there, the history project dying in my throat. I looked down at my plate, my face burning with a shame I could not name. It wasn't that they hated me, it was that they had forgotten I was a participant. I was part of the set dressing, like the vase of flowers or the salt shaker. Present, functional, but voiceless. This pattern repeated itself through every milestone of my adolescence. When report cards came home, the dynamic was a masterclass in gaslighting. I was a straight-A student. I buried myself in books because they were the only things that spoke back to me. I understood logic, history, and calculus. They were consistent. They had rules. If you put in the work, you got the result. I remember bringing home a report card with a 98% average. I placed it on Gordon's desk, my heart hammering a hopeful rhythm against my ribs. Gordon glanced at it, then looked at me over his reading glasses. "The teachers at that school must be grading on a curve this year," he said, tossing the paper aside. "Don't let it get to your head. Aurora, school is easy. The real world is different." 10 minutes later, Lance came in with a report card full of C's and one solitary B in gym class. Gordon frowned, but it was a frown of concern, not dismissal. "We need to get you a tutor, son," he said, his voice heavy with paternal investment. "You have so much potential. I can see it. You just need a little push to unlock it. We will hire the best. You are going to run this town one day. We just need to get you through the boring stuff first." That was the narrative. Lance's failures were temporary obstacles on his road to greatness. My successes were accidents, flukes, or evidence that the bar was set too low. "Girls do not need to overthink these things," Gordon told me once when he found me studying for the SATs at 2 a.m. He was getting a glass of water, and he looked at my textbooks with genuine annoyance. "Why are you making everything so complicated? Aurora, you will find a nice husband. Maybe do some charity work. Don't burn yourself out trying to be something you are not." "I want to go to business school," I said quietly. Gordon laughed. It was a short, sharp bark. "Business? Leave the heavy lifting to Lance. You just worry about being charming." He walked away. Leaving me alone in the kitchen with the hum of the refrigerator, I looked down at my practice test. I had scored a perfect score. I realized then that I was alone. There was no one in that house who saw me. I was a ghost haunting my own life. The only person who saw me lived 10 miles away in a retirement community that smelled of peppermint and old paper. My grandmother, Evelyn Hale. She was Gordon's mother, but she was nothing like him. She was a woman made of steel wire wrapped in silk. She had run the family finances from the shadows for 40 years while her husband took the credit. And she knew exactly what kind of man she had raised. Every Sunday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the phone in the hallway would ring. In a house where everyone had their own cell phones, the landline was a relic, ignored by Serena and Lance, but I knew who it was. "Hello, Grandma," I would answer, curling the cord around my finger, sitting on the bottom step of the stairs. "Tell me the truth. Aurora," her voice would crackle down the line, sharp and commanding. "Not the version you tell your father, the truth." Evelyn was the only one who asked me questions. She asked what I was reading. She asked what I thought about the news. She asked me to explain the stock market crash or the shipping crisis in the Suez, and she listened. She really listened. "They treat you like a piece of furniture, don't they?" she asked one Sunday. I was 16. I had spent the weekend watching Serena plan a birthday party for Lance that cost more than a small car. While my birthday the week before had been marked by a generic card signed by Gordon's secretary. "I am used to it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Do not get used to it," Evelyn snapped. "Get smart about it." That was the day my education truly began. It wasn't the education I was getting at school. It was a survival course. "Listen to me, Aurora," Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Your father is a peacock. He needs to be seen. He needs to be heard. He is so busy strutting that he misses everything happening on the ground. And Serena? She is terrified of losing her position. So she only looks up, never down." "So what do?" I asked. "You are invisible," Evelyn said. "Use it." She taught me the art of observation, over those Sunday phone calls. She trained me. "When you sit at that dinner table," she would say, "don't just stare at your plate. Listen to what your father isn't saying. Watch his hands. Does he tap his finger when he talks about the union contracts? That means he is lying. Does Serena touch her necklace when she asks about the bank accounts? That means she is overspending. I started to do it. I stopped trying to speak. I stopped trying to be part of the family portrait. Instead, I became the camera. I watched Gordon take calls in his study. The door left slightly ajar because he never thought I was worth closing it for. I heard him bullying suppliers. I heard him cutting corners on safety inspections to boost the quarterly margins. I saw the way he sweated when the bank called. I watched Lance struggle with basic math, cheating his way through high school with essays bought online, paid for with Gordon's credit card, which I saw lying on the counter. I watched Serena intercept mail from the IRS and hide it in her vanity drawer. I gathered it all. I cataloged it. I filed it away in the back of my mind. I began to understand the mechanics of the Hale family. It was a machine fueled by ego and greased with deceit. And because I was uneducated and worthless, they did it all right in front of me. They spoke in code, assuming I was too stupid to break the cipher. But Evelyn had given me the key. You are smarter than all of them combined. Evelyn told me on the day I graduated high school. Gordon had not attended the ceremony. He had a golf tournament. Serena had sent flowers. They mistake your silence for emptiness, but you are not empty. Aurora, you are a vault. What is the point of being a vault if no one knows what is inside? I asked bitterly. I was 18, accepted into a state university with a partial scholarship because Gordon had refused to pay for the Ivy League acceptance letter I had hidden under my mattress. The point, Evelyn said, is that one day the vault will open. I held on to those words through the lonely summers and the cold winters of my youth. I held on to them when Gordon introduced me to business associates as my daughter, the quiet one, while Lance was paraded as the heir apparent. I held on to them when I realized that my love for them was a currency that had no value in this house. I learned to move without making a sound. I learned to enter a room and assess the power dynamics in 3 seconds. I learned that the most dangerous person in the room is not the one shouting, but the one taking notes. My invisibility became my armor. It allowed me to survive the toxicity without absorbing it. I stopped seeking their validation because I realized their validation was based on a lie. They were playing a game of pretend, and I was the only one living in reality. The last time I spoke to Evelyn about the family before I left home, her voice was frail, her breath catching in her chest, but her mind was as sharp as a razor. They think they have buried you, she whispered. They think if they pile enough neglect on top of you, you will just cease to exist. I feel like I am ceasing to exist, I confessed, tears stinging my eyes. No, Evelyn said. The conviction in her voice traveled down the wire and settled in my spine. You are just gestating. You are waiting. She paused, and I could hear the rustle of her adjusting the phone. One day, Aurora, she said, and it sounded like a prophecy carved into stone. One day, they will look for you in the shadows, and they will find that you have become the darkness itself. One day, your invisibility will become a weapon, and when that day comes, do not hesitate to pull the trigger. I hung up the phone that Sunday with dry eyes. I went down to dinner. I sat in my usual spot. I watched Gordon brag. I watched Serena preen. I watched Lance smirk. And for the first time, I didn't feel small. I looked at them, and I didn't see my family. I saw my targets. They were eating their roast beef, completely unaware that the girl sitting across from them was no longer looking for a seat at the table. She was studying how to overturn it. I was 20 years old when I learned that love, in the Hale family, was a line item on a budget sheet, and I was the expense that had just been cut. I was a sophomore at the state university. I was studying business administration with a focus on logistics and supply chain management. It was ironic, really. I was studying the very science that made my father rich, yet he had no idea. To him, I was probably taking art history or basket weaving. I had secured a partial scholarship that covered 50% of my tuition, and I worked 2 part-time jobs to cover my books and living expenses. But I still needed Gordon for the other half of the tuition and the dorm fees. It was a fragile ecosystem, but it was working. I had a 4.0 GPA. I had just lined up an interview for a summer internship at a major distribution firm in Atlanta. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was building a runway. I could see the plane of my future sitting there, engines revving, ready to take off. Then came the text message. Family meeting. Tonight, 7 o'clock. Do not be late. The phrase, family meeting, is innocuous in most households. It suggests planning a vacation or discussing a renovation. In the Hale house, it was a summons. It was the bell tolling for an execution. I drove home from campus with a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. The house looked the same as always. Imposing, white, pristine. The magnolias were in bloom. But as I walked through the front door, the air felt different. It was thin, cold. Gordon was in his study, sitting behind the massive mahogany desk that he used like a fortress. Serena was perched on the leather sofa, sipping a glass of iced tea, looking like she was waiting for a play to begin. Lance was there, too. He was leaning against the bookshelf, scrolling through his phone, looking bored. I sat in the single wooden chair facing the desk. It was the chair for petitioners, the chair for employees who were about to be fired. "Aurora," Gordon began, clasping his hands on the desk. He did not ask how school was. He did not ask how I was. He went straight to the script. "We need to talk about the family finances." I stiffened. "Is something wrong? Is the company okay?" "The company is navigating some headwinds," Gordon said, using the corporate speak he loved to hide behind. "The market is volatile. Fuel costs are up. Margins are down. We are having to tighten our belts across the board." I nodded slowly. I read the financial news. I knew the logistics sector was actually booming, but I kept my mouth shut. I waited for the axe. "We have had to make some hard choices about resource allocation," Gordon continued. He sighed, a performance of heavy-hearted fatherhood. "Lance has been accepted into the MBA program at Duke. It is a prestigious opportunity, crucial for his future role in the company, but the tuition is significant, $200,000 over 2 years, plus living expenses." "That is great. Lance," I said automatically, though I knew his grades were mediocre at best. Gordon had probably pulled strings and donated a wing to the library to get him in. "Thank you," Lance mumbled, not looking up from his phone. "The problem," Gordon said, his voice dropping to a grave whisper, "is that we cannot support 2 tuitions right now. The liquidity just is not there." My heart stopped. I felt the blood drain from my face. I knew what was coming, but hearing it felt like a physical blow. "What are you saying, Dad?" "I am saying that we need to prioritize," Gordon said. "Lance is at a critical juncture. His degree directly impacts the succession plan for Hale Cargo. Your studies well. They are less urgent." "Less urgent?" I repeated. My voice sounded small in the big room. "I am a sophomore. If I stop now, I lose my momentum. I lose my scholarship eligibility. It is just a pause." "Aurora," Serena chimed in. Her voice was light, airy, as if she were suggesting I change my hair color rather than my life path. "Just take a year off, maybe 2. You can come back home, help around the house. I have been needing help with the garden committee." "I do not want to help with the garden committee," I said, my voice rising. "I want to finish my degree." "You are being selfish," Gordon snapped. The mask of the concerned father slipped, revealing the irritation underneath. "We are talking about the future of the company, the family legacy. Lance needs this. You are just exploring." "I am not exploring," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I am studying business. I have a 4.0 average. I have an internship lined up." Gordon waved his hand dismissively. "An internship? Cute. But let's be realistic. Aurora, you are not built for the corporate world. It is a shark tank. You are too soft." "And Lance is not?" I shot back. I couldn't help it. He failed calculus twice. Lance is a man, Gordon said. He said it simply, as if it were a scientific fact that explained everything. He commands the room. You fade into the background. We are doing you a favor. Really, why stress yourself out with exams and debt? You can live here, rent-free. Girls just need to marry well, Serena said, using a phrase she had picked up from a magazine. That is the finish line. Honey, don't try to be better than everyone else. It is unbecoming. I looked at them. I looked at the trio of them. The father who saw me as a bad investment. The stepmother who saw me as a rival. The stepbrother who saw me as nothing at all. You promised, I said. I looked directly at Gordon. Before Mom died, you sat by her bed. I was there. You promised her that you would make sure I got an education. You swore to her. The room went silent. Bringing up my mother was the one taboo in the Hale house. It was the ghost they could not banish. Gordon's face went hard. His eyes, usually cold, turned glacial. Your mother is gone. Aurora, he said. She does not have to pay the bills. I do, and the circumstances have changed. The circumstances haven't changed, I said. Standing up, my legs were shaking, but I forced them to hold me. You just chose him. You have always chosen him. Because he has a future. Gordon slammed his hand on the desk. Look at yourself. Aurora, what are you going to do with a business degree? Be a secretary? A middle manager? Lance is going to be a CEO. I am betting on the winner. That is just business. Something inside me broke. It was not a loud break. It was not a shattering of glass. It was the quiet, metallic click of a deadbolt sliding into place. It was the sound of a door locking forever. I realized then that there was no amount of work I could do, no grade I could earn, no achievement I could unlock that would make him value me. I was fighting a war I could never win because the enemy was also the judge. Okay, I said. The word hung in the air. Okay? Gordon blinked. Surprised by my sudden surrender, he expected tears. He expected begging. He was ready for a fight, and I had just walked off the battlefield. You are cutting me off. I understand, I said. My voice was devoid of emotion. I felt strangely detached, as if I were watching the scene from the ceiling. I will pack my things. You can stay here, Serena offered, though her eyes said please leave. We are not kicking you out of the house, just the tuition. No, I said. I think I will go. Suit yourself, Gordon grunted, already turning back to his papers. But do not expect a handout later when you realize the real world is harder than a classroom. You are walking away from safety. Aurora. I am walking away from you, I said softly. He did not hear me, or he did not care. I went up to my room. It was the same room I had slept in since I was a baby, but it felt like a hotel room now. I did not belong here. I grabbed my large suitcase. I did not pack everything. I left the dresses Serena had bought me for parties I hated. I left the jewelry Gordon had given me as tax write-offs. I packed my books. I packed my laptop. I packed the framed photo of my mother and me. I packed my clothes, the practical ones, the ones I had bought with my own wages. I had $3,000 in my savings account. It was money I had scraped together from waiting tables and shelving books at the library. It was not enough for tuition. It was barely enough for 2 months of rent in a real city. But it was mine. I dragged the suitcase to the door. I looked around the room one last time. I was saying goodbye to the girl who used to cry into that pillow. She was dead now. I walked down the hallway. The house was quiet. The meeting was over. And they had likely moved on to dessert. As I reached the top of the stairs, I heard voices drifting up from the living room. They thought I was still packing. They thought I couldn't hear. It was Serena's voice. She was on the phone. Oh, stop worrying, Catherine, she was saying, likely talking to her sister. We are not broke. Gordon just bought that new 30-foot sailboat last week. We needed to trim the fat. And honestly, spending $40,000 a year on Aurora? It is like flushing money down the toilet. She is never going to be anything. We decided to put the resources where they matter. I froze on the landing. My hand gripped the banister so hard my knuckles turned white. We are not broke. Gordon just bought that new 30-foot sailboat. It was not a tragedy. It was not a financial crisis. It was a choice. They had the money. They could have paid for both of us without blinking. Gordon could have sold one of his 3 classic cars. Serena could have skipped one European vacation. They simply did not want to. To them, my future was worth less than a sailboat. My education was less important than a status symbol that would sit in the marina and gather barnacles. I stood there for a long minute, letting the truth wash over me. It burned. It burned hotter than anger. It burned away the last shreds of hope I had been holding on to. The hope that maybe, just maybe, my father actually loved me but was just bad at showing it. He did not love me. He did not even like me. I was a bad asset. I was fat to be trimmed. I did not go down there and scream at them. I did not confront Serena about the sailboat. What was the point? They would just deny it or tell me I didn't understand liquid assets versus capital investments. I picked up my suitcase. It felt lighter now. The burden of trying to please them was gone. I walked down the stairs, silent as a ghost. I passed the living room. I saw the back of Gordon's head. I saw Serena laughing into her phone. I saw Lance asleep with his mouth open. I walked out the front door. The night air was humid and thick with the scent of jasmine. I walked to my car, a 10-year-old sedan I had bought from a neighbor. I threw my suitcase in the back. I did not look back at the house. The lights were on, glowing warm and inviting against the dark. But I knew it was a trick. It was a lighthouse built on jagged rocks. I drove. I did not know exactly where I was going, only that it had to be away. I drove west. I drove until the manicured lawns of Savannah gave way to the pine forests and the long, lonely stretches of the interstate. I drove until my eyes blurred and the gas light came on. I stopped at a cheap motel on the outskirts of Macon. The neon sign buzzed and flickered. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and industrial cleaner. The carpet was sticky. It was a far cry from the silk sheets of the Hale estate, but as I sat on the lumpy mattress, listening to the sound of trucks thundering down the highway, I felt a strange, terrifying freedom. I opened my notebook. It was a fresh page. I took a pen and wrote a single sentence. I pressed down hard, the ink bleeding through the paper, carving the words into the fiber. From now on, no one defines my value. I looked at the words. They were not just a promise. They were a contract with myself. Gordon Hale had made his bet. He had bet on Lance. He had bet against me. He had no idea that by cutting me loose, he hadn't destroyed me. He had just removed the only thing that was holding me back, my need for his approval. I turned off the lamp. The room went dark, but my mind was bright, burning with a cold, blue flame. Tomorrow, I would start driving again. I would find a city where the name Hale meant nothing. I would find a job that paid in cash, and I would build a life that owed nothing to anyone. They wanted me to be uneducated? Fine, I would learn from the world. They wanted me to be worthless? Fine, I would build a worth they couldn't comprehend. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I slept without dreaming of the house on the bluff. The nightmare was over. The hunt had begun. Kansas City, Missouri, was not a place where people went to be discovered. It was a place where people went to work. My new life did not smell like magnolias and sea salt anymore. It smelled of burnt coffee beans, diesel exhaust, and the metallic tang of brake dust. I rented a studio apartment that was smaller than the walk-in closet I had left behind in Savannah. It was situated directly next to a 24-hour auto repair shop. The soundtrack of my nights was the rhythmic thud-thud hiss of a pneumatic impact wrench and the mournful wail of freight train horns echoing off the rail yards. I did not sleep much, but for the first time in my life, I was not tired. I was hungry. I had traded my father's allowance for 2 jobs that paid minimum wage and demanded maximum effort. from 5 in the morning until 1 in the afternoon. I was a barista at a high-volume coffee shop downtown. I learned to make lattes for businessmen who treated me like a vending machine. I learned to smile when they complained about the foam. It was a masterclass in swallowing pride, a skill my stepmother had unknowingly prepared me for, though the customers were generally more polite than Serena. But my real education began at 2 in the afternoon. I worked as an administrative assistant at Dorsey Logistics, a mid-sized warehouse and transport operation on the industrial edge of the city. The owner, Frank Dorsey, was a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite and left out in the rain for 40 years. He had hands stained permanently with grease and a voice that sounded like gravel crunching under tires. Frank did not care about my last name. He did not care about my pedigree. When I interviewed for the job, wearing a thrift store blazer, he had asked me one question. "Can you use a spreadsheet without crying?" "I can make the spreadsheet cry." I had answered. He hired me on the spot, $12 an hour, no benefits. The office was a glass-walled box overlooking the warehouse floor. It was chaotic. Phones rang constantly. Drivers yelled over the radio. Manifests were piled in towers that threatened to topple over. My job was to answer the phones, file the bills of lading, and make sure the coffee pot was never empty. But I did not just file papers. I read them. Every document that passed through my hands was a lesson. I learned the difference between less than truckload and full truckload. I learned what a detention fee was. I learned that in the shipping world. Time was not just money. It was the only currency that mattered. While the other office staff gossiped about their weekends or complained about the heat, I watched the floor. I watched how the forklifts moved. I watched how the pallets were stacked. I noticed that the drivers who arrived between 4 and 6 in the evening always got stuck at the loading dock for an extra 40 minutes, because the shift change was disorganized. I started taking notes. Not for Frank. For me. At night, back in my noisy apartment, I turned my kitchen table into a war room. I did not have the money for tuition, so I scavenged. I took free online courses on supply chain management from MIT OpenCourseWare. I read industry white papers on logistics optimization. I lurked in forums where freight brokers complained about market rates. I realized something that Gordon Hale had never understood. He thought business was about handshakes and golf games. He was wrong. Business was about data. It was about seeing the invisible lines that connected a factory in China to a store shelf in Kansas, and finding the one knot that was slowing everything down. One Tuesday afternoon, about 6 months into the job, Frank was pacing the office, looking like he was about to punch a wall. He was chewing on an unlit cigar, a habit he had when he was stressed. "What is the matter?" I asked, looking up from a stack of invoices. "It is the damn shifting," Frank growled. "We are bleeding money on the St. Louis run. Every time we send a truck, it comes back with half the profit eaten up by fuel and wait times. I am thinking of scrapping the route." I hesitated. I was the receptionist. I was the girl who answered the phone. But the invisible girl from Savannah was starting to fade, and a new woman was taking her place. "You are not losing money on the fuel," I said. Frank stopped pacing. He turned his heavy head toward me. "Excuse me?" "It is not the fuel," I repeated, my voice steady. I looked at the driver logs from the last 3 months. The problem is the routing. Your drivers are taking the bypass to avoid the way station during peak hours, which adds 20 miles, but they are hitting traffic anyway. And because they arrive late, the receiver in St. Louis makes them wait until the morning crew comes in to unload. You are paying for overnight layovers you do not need. Frank stared at me. "How do you know that?" "I matched the GPS timestamps with the payroll logs," I said. "If you shift the departure time back by 2 hours, they hit the way station when it is less crowded. Take the direct route and arrive before the receiver's dock closes. You save $40 in fuel and $150 in layover fees per run." Frank walked over to my desk. He picked up the stack of papers I'd been scribbling on. He looked at them for a long time. The silence in the office was heavy. You figured this out on your break? He asked. I like puzzles, I said. Frank looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time. You do not lack brains, kid, he said, his voice gruff, but lacking its usual edge. You lack a playing field. Stop answering the phones. We are moving your desk. That was how I became the unofficial operations analyst for Dorsey Logistics. I stopped making coffee and started making routes. I devoured everything. I learned to negotiate with carriers who tried to bully us on rates. I learned to read people. In this industry, everyone had a tell. The truck drivers who were skimming fuel would always be overly friendly. The warehouse managers who were cooking the books would never make eye contact. The clients who were about to go bankrupt would always demand net 90 payment terms and scream about loyalty. I learned to spot the fear behind the bluster. It was the same fear I had seen in my father's eyes, but now I knew how to monetize it. My old life tried to reach out once. It was my birthday. A small, elegant envelope arrived at my apartment building. I knew the handwriting. It was Serena's calligraphy. I stood by the metal mailboxes in the lobby. Holding the envelope, I could feel the card inside, probably thick and expensive. There was likely a check, a guilt fee to make them feel better about abandoning me. $500? Maybe $1,000? Enough to buy silence. I did not open it. I did not want their money. Their money came with strings, and I was done being a puppet. I took a black marker from my bag and wrote 3 words across the front in bold. Capital letters. Return to sender. I dropped it back in the outgoing slot and walked away. I felt lighter. I went to the library and checked out a book on SQL database programming. That was my birthday present to myself. The real test came a year later. Dorsey Logistics was trying to land a contract with a regional manufacturing giant, a company called Apex. It was a deal that would double Frank's revenue. We had been negotiating for weeks. Finally, the contract arrived. Frank was ecstatic. He was ready to sign. He had the champagne chilling in the break room fridge. This is it. Aurora, he said, beaming. This puts us in the big leagues. He tossed the contract on my desk. Give it a once-over, will you? Just to check the spelling. I sat down with the 40-page document. I read the preamble. I read the liability clauses. I read the definitions. And then I saw it. It was buried in the appendix, under a section labeled Variable Adjustment Factors. It was a paragraph written in dents. Deliberate legalese, Clause 44C. In the event of market fluctuation exceeding 3% in the Consumer Price Index, the client reserves the right to renegotiate base shipping rates retroactively for the preceding fiscal quarter. I read it twice, then I read it a third time. My blood ran cold. Frank, I called out. He stuck his head out of his office. Yeah? Do not sign this, Frank frowned. What? Why? The lawyer said it was standard. Your lawyers are looking for lawsuits. I am looking for bankruptcy, I said. I stood up and walked into his office. Slamming the contract down on his desk. Look at Clause 44C. What about it? It says they can lower your pay retroactively, I explained, tapping the paper. If inflation ticks up, which it does every year, they can decide that they overpaid you for the last 3 months and deduct the difference from your next check. They are shifting the entire economic risk of the market onto you. If you sign this, and fuel prices spike, you will be paying them to move their freight. Frank's face went pale. He snatched the paper and read the clause. His jaw tightened. Those sons of bitches, he whispered. They smiled at me. They took me to dinner. They banked on you being too excited to read the fine print, I said. It is a trap, Frank. We can't lose this deal, he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. I already leased 3 new trucks. We won't lose it, I said. We are going to fix it. How? They have a legal team the size of an army. They have lawyers, I said. But they need trucks. And right now, capacity in the Midwest is tighter than a drum. They don't have leverage. They just have bluff. I sat at Frank's computer. I didn't ask for permission. I drafted an email to the vice president of operations at Apex. I didn't use legal jargon. I used math. I attached a spreadsheet showing the current lane rates, the fuel trends, and a projection of what Clause 44C would do to the service levels. I wrote, "We are happy to partner with Apex, but we build our business on stability, not gambling. Clause 44C incentivizes us to prioritize other clients when the market fluctuates. If you want guaranteed capacity, you need to guarantee the rate. Strike the clause, or we cannot guarantee the trucks." I hit send before Frank could stop me. For 2 hours. The office was silent. Frank paced. He looked like he was going to throw up. "You might have just killed the company." "Aurora," he muttered. "Wait," I said. At 4 o'clock. The phone rang. Frank stared at it. He picked it up slowly. "Dorsey Logistics. This is Frank." He listened. He nodded. He frowned. Then, slowly, a smile broke across his face, cracking the granite. "I appreciate that," Frank said. "We will send the revised copy over in the morning." He hung up. He looked at me. "They dropped the clause," he said, sounding stunned. "They said it was an administrative error. They want a sign." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Frank walked over to the mini fridge and pulled out the cheap champagne. He poured 2 plastic cups. He handed one to me. "You saved my ass," he said. He took a sip, then grimaced. "You know, you are wasted as an assistant." "I know," I said. Frank sat on the edge of my desk. He looked at the stacks of books on my shelf. Books on coding, on macroeconomics, on linear algebra. "You are trying to learn everything, aren't you?" he asked. "I am trying to catch up," I said. "I don't have a degree. Frank, I have to work twice as hard to get half as far." Frank shook his head. He laughed. A short, barking sound. "Kid, let me tell you something," he said. "I have hired a dozen MBAs in my life. They can quote the textbook, but they can't find their ass with both hands and a map. You? You see the matrix?" He leaned in close, his eyes serious. "You do not need a piece of paper to win in this game. Aurora," he said. "A degree is just a ticket to the line. You are already in the stadium." "Then what do I need?" I asked. "You have the instinct," Frank said. "But instinct isn't scalable. If you want to beat the big guys, the guys who tried to screw us today, you don't need a degree." He pointed to the computer screen, where my spreadsheet was still glowing. "You need a system," he said. "You need to take what is in that scary brain of yours and turn it into something that can run without you. Build a machine. Aurora. Don't just be the mechanic." I looked at the screen. I looked at the rows of data, the columns of numbers that represented trucks moving across the country. I saw the inefficiencies. I saw the waste. I saw the empty miles. And suddenly, I didn't just see a spreadsheet. I saw a blueprint. "A system," I whispered. I went home that night, but I didn't study for the next online exam. I opened a blank coding terminal on my laptop. I typed a name for the project folder. I didn't call it homework. I called it Black Harbor. It was time to stop learning the rules and start writing my own code. The washer and dryer in the apartment above me were thumping like a heartbeat, and the train whistle blew in the distance, lonely and defiant. I began to type. Success is usually loud. It screams from billboards, flaunts itself in press releases, and parks itself in the front row of valet lots. My success was different. It was silent. It was a submarine running deep beneath the surface, tracking the noisy battleships above, waiting for the perfect coordinates to fire. 4 years after I left Savannah, I incorporated Black Harbor Optimization Group. I did not name it after myself. I did not put my face on the website. In fact, if you looked up the company registration, you would find my name buried deep in the articles of incorporation, hidden behind a labyrinth of LLCs and holding entities to the outside world. Black Harbor was a faceless algorithm, a phantom consultancy firm that specialized in fixing broken logistics networks. I had a very specific reason for this aggressive anonymity. I knew my family. I knew Gordon Hale. If Gordon knew I was building something, he would have done one of two things. If it was failing, he would have mocked it to boost his own ego. If it was succeeding, he would have tried to acquire it, claim credit for it, or destroy it out of spite. He could not abide a world where his uneducated daughter outpaced him. So, I became a ghost. I hired a proxy to be the face of the company. Ethan Cole was a former supply chain director from a major retailer who had been pushed out for being too radical. He was 50 years old, polished, and spoke with the kind of baritone authority that men like my father respected. I made him the chief financial officer and the public face of client relations. "You handle the handshakes, Ethan," I told him when I hired him. "I will handle the engine." "You want to remain the wizard behind the curtain?" he asked, looking at the complex code I had written to predict shipping lane disruptions. "The wizard was a fraud," I corrected him. "I am the architect. I just do not want the tenants to know who built the house." We started small, operating out of a renovated loft in the River Market district of Kansas City. We took on the clients that the big firms ignored, the regional haulers, the mid-size manufacturers, the companies that were bleeding cash through invisible wounds. We did not offer them advice. We offered them a software patch. My system, the one I had birthed on a kitchen table, plugged into their chaotic data and organized it into a symphony of efficiency. Then, the phone call came that changed the trajectory of my war. It was a Tuesday morning. The rain was lashing against the brick exterior of our office. My personal cell phone rang. The area code was from Savannah. I stared at it. I almost let it go to voicemail. But something, perhaps the instinct Evelyn had instilled in me, made me answer. "Aurora Sanders?" a woman's voice asked. It was professional, crisp, and devoid of the southern drawl I associated with social calls. "Speaking. This is Mara Whitfield. I am an attorney representing the estate of Evelyn Hale." My breath hitched. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I had not spoken to Evelyn in 6 months. I had been so busy building, so busy proving her right, that I had missed the chance to say goodbye. "She passed away peacefully on Sunday evening," Mara said, her voice softening slightly. "She left strict instructions that you were to be notified directly. Not through your father." I closed my eyes. I did not cry. Tears were a luxury I could not afford in the middle of a workday. I just felt a heavy, hollow ache in the center of my chest, like a stone dropping into a well. "I see," I managed to say. "There is more," Mara continued. "Evelyn left a living trust, a private account that she separated from the family estate over 20 years ago. It is solely in your name. Gordon and Serena have no knowledge of it, and no legal claim to it. I flew back to Savannah the next day. I did not go to the house. I did not go to the funeral, where I knew Serena would be performing her grief for an audience. I went straight to Mara Whitfield's office. The inheritance was not a fortune by billionaire standards, but to me, it was an arsenal. $350,000. Mara handed me a sealed envelope. She wrote this the week before she died. I opened it. The handwriting was shaky, the ink faint, but the message was as sharp as the woman who wrote it. "My dearest Aurora, if you are reading this, I am gone, and you are likely still in the shadows. Good. Stay there a little longer. This money is not for shoes. It is not for a house. It is fuel. I watched them clip your wings for years. My darling, now, I am giving you the wind. Do not come back until you are ready. When they see you, it must be when they can no longer touch you. Make them need you before they know who you are. Love, Grandma." I folded the letter and placed it in my purse. I looked at Mara. "Transfer the funds to Black Harbor's capital account," I said. "All of it?" Mara asked, raising an eyebrow. "You could buy a condo. You could take a vacation." "I am buying a shovel," I said. "I have a grave to dig." With Evelyn's money, Black Harbor stopped being a startup and started being a predator. We moved into a larger space. I hired 18 people, data scientists, coding prodigies, and logistics veterans who were tired of corporate politics. I built a culture that was the antithesis of Hale Cargo. At Hale Cargo, Success was measured by how much the boss liked you. At Black Harbor, we measured everything by key performance indicators. We tracked on-time delivery rates down to the second. We analyzed fuel consumption to the decimal point. If an idea was good, I did not care if it came from the intern or the director. We implemented it. We were lean, we were fast, and we were invisible. Our revenue stabilized. We hit $1 million in annual recurring revenue. Then 2, then 5. We were solving problems for trucking companies in Chicago, shipping lines in Seattle, and distributors in Dallas. And then, the inevitable happened. The fish I had been waiting for swam into my net. It was 3 years after I started the company. Ethan Cole walked into my office, a strange expression on his face. He looked amused and slightly nervous. "You are never going to believe who just requested a consultation," Ethan said. I didn't look up from my monitors. "Who?" "Hale Cargo and Freight." My fingers froze on the keyboard. The cursor blinked at me, a steady, rhythmic pulse. I slowly turned my chair around. "Tell me exactly what happened." "Their VP of Operations called," Ethan said. Sitting down, "They are in trouble. Aurora. They lost 2 major contracts last quarter because their delivery reliability dropped below 80%. Their fuel costs are through the roof. They heard about us from a partner in Memphis. They want to know if we can audit their system and install our optimization software." I sat back, steepling my fingers. It was almost too perfect. Gordon was failing. Lance, the future CEO with the expensive MBA, was clearly driving the ship into the rocks, and in their desperation, they were reaching out to the very entity that could save them, without knowing it was owned by the daughter they had discarded. "Take the meeting," I said. "Do you want to be there?" Ethan asked. "No," I said instantly. "If Gordon sees my face, he will walk away out of pride. We need to hook him first. You take the meeting, you pitch the premium package. And Ethan?" "Yes?" "Charge them double our standard rate." Ethan smirked. "Is that the family discount?" "That is the stupidity tax," I said. The negotiations took 2 weeks. I reviewed every email, every proposal, every clause, but I never stepped into the room. I was the phantom editor. Ethan reported back that Gordon was arrogant but desperate. Lance sat in the meetings looking confused, using buzzwords he didn't understand, while Serena hovered around worrying about the cost. But the numbers didn't lie. Our simulation showed that Black Harbor's software could save Hale Cargo over $1.5 million in the first year alone by optimizing their route density and automating their load balancing. They signed. I remember the day the contract landed on my desk. It had Gordon Hale's signature at the bottom, that flamboyant, sweeping scrawl that I had seen on so many permission slips he hadn't bothered to read. He had signed a 3-year binding agreement with Black Harbor Optimization Group. He was now paying me every time a Hale Cargo truck moved. My code told it where to go, every time they saved money on fuel. A percentage of that saving flowed into my bank account. I became the invisible spine of his company. I was holding him up. Without me, his operations would collapse under the weight of his own inefficiency. It was a strange, intoxicating power. I could have shut him down with a single command line. I could have routed his trucks to the wrong states. I could have deleted his customer database. But I didn't. That would be petty. That would be vandalism. I wanted something far more total. I wanted ownership. For 2 years. We ran his company better than he ever could. His profits stabilized. He went back to bragging at the country club about how modern and tech-savvy his operation had become. He took credit for the efficiency my mind had designed. I let him build his house on my land. Because the higher he built it, the harder it would fall when I pulled the foundation out. Then came the envelope. It arrived on a Tuesday, just like the news of Evelyn's death. It was heavy, cream-colored cardstock with gold leaf lettering. "You are cordially invited to the retirement celebration of Gordon Hale, Harborcrest Society Hall, Savannah, Georgia, Saturday, the 15th of November." I stared at the card. It was a summons to witness his final victory lap. He wanted an audience for his legacy. He probably sent it to me out of obligation, or perhaps to rub it in my face one last time, to show me the empire he was handing over to Lance. He expected me to ignore it, or perhaps he expected me to show up in a cheap dress, looking defeated, so he could point at me and say, "See, I was right." He did not know that the woman holding the invitation was his biggest vendor. He did not know that the uneducated girl controlled the algorithm that paid for the champagne he would be drinking. I picked up a pen. I looked at the RSVP card. There were 2 boxes. Declines with regret, accepts with pleasure. I did not feel regret, and I certainly did not feel pleasure. I felt a cold, sharp clarity. It was time. The system was fully integrated. The trap was set. The dependency was absolute. I drew a thick black X through the box marked accepts. I was not going there to toast him. I was not going there to make a scene. I was going there to deliver the final invoice. I slid the card into the return envelope and sealed it. "Ethan?" I called out to the outer office. He appeared in the doorway. "Yes, boss?" "Prepare the termination papers for the Hale cargo contract," I said, my voice steady. "And book the corporate jet for Savannah. We leave on Friday." "Are we going to a meeting?" he asked. I looked at the gold invitation on my desk. "No," I said. "We are going to a funeral. They just don't know they are the ones in the casket." The gravel driveway of the Harbor Crest Society Hall crunched beneath the tires of my rental car. It was a sound I remembered from childhood. The auditory signal that you had arrived at the epicenter of Savannah's elite. But tonight, the sound did not make my stomach turn. It sounded like the tumblers of a safe falling into place. I handed the keys to the valet, a young man who looked at my car with mild disdain. It was a generic luxury sedan, nothing compared to the parade of Bentleys and vintage Rolls-Royces lining the front curb. He handed me a ticket without making eye contact. I smoothed the fabric of my dress. I had spent a long time choosing it. In the old days, Serena would force me into frilly, pastel concoctions that made me look like an overgrown toddler, or ill-fitting department store clearance finds that ensured I never outshone her. Tonight, I wore midnight blue silk. It was cut on the bias, draped like liquid armor. There were no sequins, no logos, and no loud patterns. It was the kind of dress that whispered its price tag rather than shouting it. It was from a designer in Milan who only made 50 pieces a season. It cost more than the first car I had driven away from home in. I walked up the grand staircase. The air was thick with humidity and the scent of expensive perfume. I could hear the hum of 200 voices inside, a hive of bees swarming around a pot of honey. Serena was guarding the entrance like a velvet rope bouncer. She wore a gold sequined gown that caught every photon of light in the lobby. It was aggressive. It screamed, "Look at me. I am the queen." She spotted me instantly. Her eyes narrowed, scanning me from head to toe, looking for a loose thread, a scuff on my shoe, anything she could criticize. When she found nothing, her smile tightened into a rictus of fake warmth. "Aurora," she cooed, stepping forward to block my path. She leaned in for a hug but hovered 3 inches away, careful not to smudge her makeup. "You actually came. We were taking bets." "Hello, Serena," I said, stepping back just enough to make the rejection physical. "It is a big night. I would not miss it." She tilted her head, her eyes flicking over my dress again. "Is that new? Your father was so worried you would not have anything suitable to wear. He was afraid you might show up in work clothes." "He was worried?" I smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. "How thoughtful of him. Tell him I managed to scrape something together." Serena's smile faltered. She sensed the change in tone, but she could not place it. She was used to the Aurora who looked at the floor. She did not know what to do with an Aurora who looked her dead in the eye. "Well," she said, waving a hand dismissively toward the ballroom. "Go on in. Try not to cause a scene. We have important people here tonight." "I know," I said. "I invited some of them." I walked past her before she could process that comment. The ballroom was a sea of tuxedos and gowns. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling. I moved through the crowd, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. I held it by the stem, the glass cool against my fingers. I scanned the room for the seating chart. It was displayed on an easel near the bar, framed in gold. I ran my finger down the list. Table 1 was the head table. Gordon, Serena, Lance, and the mayor. Table 2 was the board of directors. I found my name near the bottom. Aurora Sanders. Table 19. I looked around. Table 19 was in the far back corner, directly next to the swinging double doors of the kitchen. Every time a waiter came out with a tray of shrimp, the door would waft the smell of garlic and dish soap over the table. It was a classic power play. It was Gordon's way of saying, "You are here, but you are not part of us. You are the help." I walked to the table. The other guests seated there were the cast-offs of the Hale Empire, a distant cousin who had a gambling problem, the former secretary who had been retired 5 years ago, and a man I recognized as the gardener's son. They looked up as I approached, offering sympathetic smiles. They knew what Table 19 meant. I sat down. I did not look humiliated. I crossed my legs and leaned back, surveying the room like a general surveying a battlefield from a high ridge. From my vantage point, I could see everything. I saw Gordon moving through the crowd near the front. He was in his element, holding a scotch, slapping backs. I watched him approach a group of men near the stage. One of them was the CEO of a major shipping line, a man whose contract with Hale Cargo was currently pending renewal. I stood up and drifted closer, staying in the shadows of a large floral arrangement. I needed to hear the temperature of the room. "Record profits this quarter," Gordon was saying, his voice booming with false modesty. "We have really tightened up the ship. Efficiency is up 40%. "I noticed," the shipping CEO said. "Your turnaround times in the Midwest are impressive. Gordon, how did you manage that? You used to be a week behind on the St. Louis lane." Gordon chuckled, taking a sip of his scotch. "Well, you know me, Bob. I invested in technology. We brought in a partner to handle the back end, a group called Black Harbor." My heart hammered a slow, steady rhythm against my ribs. Hearing my company's name in his mouth was surreal. "Black Harbor?" another man asked. "I have heard of them. Very exclusive. Nobody knows who runs it. They say it is some ex-military logistics genius or a Silicon Valley defector. Who is the guy behind it?" Gordon shrugged, a gesture of supreme indifference. "Who cares? As long as the trucks move. I do not care if it is run by a monkey with an abacus. They are just vendors. We tell them what to do, and they do it. They are the backbone. Sure, but we are the brain." I swirled my champagne. "The brain," he said. He didn't know the brain was standing 10 feet away, wearing midnight blue silk. "Well, whatever you are paying them, it is worth it," the CEO said. "If you can keep those numbers up, we will sign that 5-year extension." "Oh, we will keep them up," Gordon promised. "I have them on a tight leash." I turned away, fighting the urge to laugh out loud. A tight leash. He thought he was walking the dog, but he was the one wearing the collar. I made my way back toward the edge of the room. I needed air before the speeches started. Well, if it isn't the prodigal daughter." I stopped. Lance was blocking my path. He looked older, heavier. His face had lost the boyish softness and gained the puffy, red-tinged look of a man who drank too much expensive bourbon and slept too little. He was wearing a tuxedo that was slightly too tight across the chest. "Hello, Lance," I said. "I am surprised you showed up," he sneered, looking down at me. He held a glass of red wine, sloshing it dangerously close to my dress. "Dad said you were living in a garage somewhere in Missouri, fixing cars?" "Something like that," I said. "And now you are here," he laughed, shaking his head. "Looking for a handout? Trying to get back in the will before the old man hangs it up?" "I do not need the will, Lance. Oh, please, everyone needs money, especially someone who dropped out of college to, what was it? Find yourself?" He stepped closer, invading my personal space. "Let me give you some advice. Little sister, do not embarrass us tonight. I am taking over as CEO next month. I run a tight ship. I do not have room for passengers." "You are taking over?" I asked, feigning surprise. "Congratulations. That is a big responsibility." "I was born for it," Lance said, puffed up like a peacock. "I have the degree, I have the vision, and I'm going to cut costs even further. In fact, I am thinking of renegotiating that vendor contract Dad loves so much. That Black Harbor group? I think they are overcharging us." I looked at him. The irony was so thick I could taste it. He was threatening to fire me. He was threatening to fire the only reason his company was solvent. "I would be careful with that if I were you," I said softly. "Why?" Lance challenged. "You think you know business now? You are still playing pretend. Aurora, you always were." I stepped in close. I lowered my voice so only he could hear. It was the voice I used when I told a trucking union boss to back down. "Lance," I said, "you are standing on a trapdoor. Do not jump up and down." He blinked, confused by the sudden coldness in my tone. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means that after tonight, you will wish you had said something else." I walked around him, leaving him standing there with his mouth slightly open. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. The murmur of the crowd died down. It was time. I moved to the side of the room. Near the exit, I did not return to table 19. I wanted a clear path to the door. Gordon walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. He soaked it in, raising his hands, beaming. He launched into his speech. He thanked the board. He thanked the clients. He thanked Serena, who dabbed at her dry eyes with a handkerchief. Then, his eyes swept the room. He was looking for a punchline. He found me standing in the shadows. "And my daughter, Aurora," he said into the microphone. The room turned to look. "You know," Gordon said, chuckling, "people ask me if I am disappointed that she never finished school, that she has no degree, no career, just drifting." He paused for effect. The silence in the room was heavy, awkward. "And I tell them," Gordon continued, his voice dripping with fake benevolence, "that not everyone is built for greatness. Some people are just decoration, uneducated, worthless in the boardroom. But hey, she makes the family look charitable, doesn't she?" The laughter started. It rippled through the room, hesitant at first, then louder as the guests realized Gordon wanted them to laugh. They were laughing at his cruelty because they feared his power. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but it was not shame. It was fuel. I stepped forward into the edge of the spotlight. I raised my glass. "Cheers," I said. My voice was not amplified, but in the sudden hush that followed my movement, it carried, "This is the last time anyone here will see me." I turned. I did not run. I walked. My heels clicked on the hardwood floor. Click, 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 a metronome counting down the final seconds of the Hale Empire. I pushed through the double doors. The laughter behind me cut off abruptly as the heavy wood swung shut. I walked through the lobby. Serena and Lance were likely already scrambling to follow me, to drag me back and force an apology. But I was faster. I was already out the front door. The night air hit my face, cool and clean. The valet was bringing my car around. My phone vibrated in my clutch. I pulled it out. It was a message from Ethan Cole. "Alert. Hale Cargo Legal just emailed. They sent a 5-year renewal contract. They are terrified of losing the rates. They added a non-compete clause to try to lock us in exclusively. They are panicking." I stared at the screen. Gordon had just mocked me on stage while his lawyers were frantically trying to handcuff his company to mine. He needed me. He needed me so badly that he was trying to legally force me to stay. Even as he told the world I was worthless, the valet opened my car door. I slid into the leather seat. I looked at the text message again. The cursor blinked. I typed my reply. I did not hesitate. I did not need to consult a lawyer. I was the owner. I was the CEO. And I was the daughter who had finally had enough. I typed 5 words. Do not renew. Prepare termination. I hit send. I put the phone down and gripped the steering wheel. I watched the message sent notification fade. Inside that hall, they were still drinking my champagne, but the tap had just been turned off. The morning sun sliced through the heavy velvet curtains of my hotel suite in downtown Savannah, but it brought no warmth. The air in the room was conditioned to a sterile chill. Matching the temperature of my blood, I had not slept. I had spent the night watching the city lights, knowing that just a few miles away, the Hale estate was likely in a state of chaotic damage control. At 7 o'clock, my phone began its inevitable seizure. I picked it up from the bedside table. The notifications were stacked like bricks in a wall I was expected to climb. They were not messages of support. They were the frantic, self-serving wellness checks of people who thrive on proximity to power and panic when that power is threatened. Aunt Linda, a woman who had not remembered my birthday in a decade, was the first. Aurora, honey, we are all so worried about you. Your outburst last night was so unlike you. Are you off your medication? Please let us help. I did not have medication. I did not have an outburst. I had a moment of clarity, but that was their narrative, wasn't it? If a woman speaks an uncomfortable truth, she must be hysterical. If she walks away from abuse, she must be unstable. They were already rewriting the story of the previous night to protect Gordon. Then came Cousin Beth. Lance is furious. He says you ruined the networking hour. Where are you? Mom says you should come to brunch and apologize before Gordon cuts you out of the will for good. I deleted the thread without replying. The thread of the will was their favorite leash. They had no idea I had cut that leash myself years ago. Then, the command from the king himself. Gordon's text was short, devoid of punctuation, and radiated fury. Call me immediately. Unacceptable behavior. We need to handle this press fallout. He did not ask if I was okay. He did not ask why I left. He only cared about the press. He was worried that the local business journal would run a story about his daughter laughing at his retirement toast. He wanted me to fix the crack in his portrait. I placed the phone face down on the marble table. I would not call him. The days of me answering his summons were over. Today, I spoke a different language. I spoke the language of contract law. I showered and dressed in a charcoal gray suit, armor for the modern battlefield. I skipped breakfast. My stomach was a knot of anticipation. At 9 o'clock, I walked into the law offices of Mara Whitfield. The office smelled of mahogany and old leather, a sharp contrast to the sleek, glass-walled sterility of Black Harbor. Mara was waiting for me. She was a woman in her 60s with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that had seen every dirty trick Savannah had to offer. She had been Evelyn's attorney, and now she was the only person in this city who knew the full architecture of my plan. "You made quite an exit," Mara said as I sat down. She did not smile, but there was a glint of approval in her eyes. "The grapevine is saying you had a mental breakdown." "The grapevine is fertilized by my stepmother," I said, placing a thick file folder on her desk. "Let them talk. I prefer them distracted." Mara opened the file. Inside was the master service agreement between Hale Cargo and Black Harbor Optimization Group. "I need you to review the termination clause one last time," I said. "I want to be certain, if I trigger the 30-day exit today, is there any loophole they can use to force an injunction? Can they claim essential dependency to stop us from pulling the plug?" Mara put on her reading glasses. She ran a manicured finger down the dense legal text. The room was silent, save for the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. "Clause 17, Section B," Mara murmured. "Provider reserves the right to terminate services without cause with 30 days written notice. Client acknowledges that Black Harbor is a third-party vendor and holds no fiduciary responsibility for internal operational continuity post-termination." She looked up. "It is ironclad. Aurora, you wrote this well. You absolved yourself of their survival." "I did not want to be their crutch forever," I said. "I just wanted to be the one who decided when to kick it away." "However," Mara said, leaning back, "there is a rumor circulating. I had a call this morning from a junior partner at a firm that represents one of the trucking unions. He asked if I knew anything about a shell company owning Black Harbor. He mentioned the name Sanders." My spine stiffened. How did he get that name? People dig when money is involved, Mara warned. Gordon is telling people that Black Harbor is the secret to his success. His competitors are jealous. They are looking for the owner so they can poach the technology. If they dig deep enough into the state filings, they will find the link to your mother's maiden name eventually. Then we have to move fast, I said. I cannot let a competitor out me. I have to be the one to drop the curtain. Mara closed the file. She took off her glasses and looked at me with an expression that softened the hard lines of her face. It was the look Evelyn used to give me. Aurora, she said softly, are you sure about this? This is not just a business move. This is a demolition. Once you send this letter, there is no going back to Sunday dinners. There is no reconciliation. There never was, I said. Those dinners were a lie. The reconciliation was a fantasy I used to comfort myself. Evelyn told me once that the truth is a heavy enough weapon, Mara said. She said, don't be cruel, just be honest. The truth will do the damage for you. Do not destroy them out of spite. Destroy the lie they are living. I am not doing this for spite, I said, standing up. I am doing it for the girl they erased. I am doing it for the 32 years of silence. I left Mara's office with the legal blessing I needed. My next stop was the temporary command center I had set up in a conference room at a nearby business hotel. Ethan Cole was already there. Surrounded by laptops and monitors, he looked tired. He had been up all night running the simulations I had requested. Coffee? Ethan asked, holding up a pot. Data, I replied. He spun a monitor around to face me. The screen was awash of red graphs and plummeting trend lines. I ran the scenario 3 times, Ethan said, his voice grave. It is ugly. Aurora, Hail Cargo has fully integrated our API into their dispatch system. They fired their manual scheduling team 6 months ago to cut costs, remember? They are 100% dependent on our algorithm to route their trucks. He pointed to a sharp drop on the graph. Day 1 of termination. Efficiency drops by 15% as they switch to manual backups, he explained. Day 7. They start missing delivery windows. Day 14. The fuel costs spike by 20% because they lose the optimized routing. Day 30. The system goes dark. And then? I asked. Then they breach their contracts with their 3 biggest clients, Ethan said. The penalties alone will wipe out their cash reserves in 90 days. Gordon will face a shareholder revolt. The bank will call in the loans on the new warehouse. It is a death spiral. I looked at the red lines. It looked like a heart monitor flatlining. This was the company my grandfather had built. This was the legacy Gordon claimed to protect, and he had made it so hollow, so fragile, that simply removing my invisible hand would cause it to implode. He did this, I whispered. He fired the people who knew how to run the business so he could buy more boats. He replaced competence with my code because it was cheaper. He hollowed it out himself. He did, Ethan agreed. But you are the one pulling the plug. Are you ready for that? There are 200 drivers who work for them. Warehouse staff, secretaries. I have thought about them, I said. I have a plan for them. But first, the tower has to fall. I sat down at the head of the table. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed white. A blank page waiting for a verdict. Draft the letter, I told Ethan. The official termination of services. Keep it standard. Keep it cold. Reference clause 17. Give them the mandatory 30 days, not a minute more. Ethan nodded and began typing. The clicking of his keyboard was the sound of a guillotine blade being hoisted, but I had another letter to write. I opened a separate document. This one was not for the legal department. This one was for Gordon. I stared at the blinking cursor. What do you say to a man who mocked you in front of 200 people? What do you say to a father who valued you less than a tax write-off? I remembered Evelyn's advice. Don't be cruel. Be honest. I began to type. To Gordon. You spent a lifetime telling me I had no place in your world. You told me I was uneducated. You told me I was a liability. You looked at my silence and saw emptiness. You were wrong. My silence was not empty. It was a classroom. While you were building a reputation, I was building a system. While you were buying applause, I was buying the debt of your incompetence. For the last 3 years, the efficiency you bragged about, the profits you flaunted, and the genius logistics you took credit for, they were all mine. The uneducated girl you laughed at last night is the architect of the only thing that works in your company. I am not leaving because I am weak. I am leaving because I am finished carrying you. Enclosed is the formal termination notice for the Black Harbor contract. You have 30 days to learn how to run your own company again. I suggest you start learning quickly. I paused. I looked at the signature line. For my entire life, I had been Aurora Hale. The name felt heavy, like a borrowed coat that didn't fit. It was the name of a girl who waited for permission to speak. I backspaced. I deleted Hale. I typed a new name, the name my mother had been born with, the name she had whispered to me in those final nights, the name of a woman who had been kind, but who had been erased by Gordon's ego. Sincerely, Aurora Sanders, CEO, Black Harbor, Optimization Group. I printed both letters. I placed the legal termination notice in a crisp, white business envelope. I placed my personal letter in a thick, cream-colored envelope. I put them both inside a larger courier packet. Ethan, I said, call a messenger, priority delivery, direct to the CEO's office at Hale Cargo. Signature required. You want to send it now? Ethan asked. It is barely noon. Now, I said, before they can file that injunction, before they can renew. I want them to be reading this while they are still hungover from the party. Ethan made the call. A courier arrived 20 minutes later. A young man in a bike helmet who had no idea he was carrying a bomb. I watched him zip up the bag and walk out the door. For the next hour, the room was silent. Ethan worked on other client accounts, pretending not to watch me. I stood by the window, looking down at the Savannah streets. I tracked the time in my head. 10 minutes to cross town. 5 minutes to get through security. 5 minutes for the elevator. I checked the tracking number on my phone. Status, out for delivery. I felt a strange sensation. It was not joy. It was the feeling of a diver who has been holding their breath for too long finally breaking the surface. My lungs burned, but I could breathe. I remembered the night I left home, the night I wrote in my notebook. From now on, no one defines my value. I had kept that promise. My phone pinged. Status, delivered, signed by S. Hale, Serena. Serena was at the office. She must have signed for it. She would open it. She was nosy. She would read the legal notice first, not understand it, and then rip open the personal letter. I could visualize the scene. I could see the confusion on her face turning to shock. I could see her running into Gordon's office, the paper trembling in her hand. I could see Gordon reading it, his face turning that dangerous shade of purple, his mind struggling to reconcile the worthless daughter with the CEO who just fired him. 1 minute passed, 2 minutes. The silence in the hotel room was deafening, and then it broke. My phone on the table began to buzz. It was not a text. It was a call. The name on the screen was Gordon Hale. I watched it ring. The vibration rattled the phone against the marble surface. A frantic, angry sound. Buzz, buzz, buzz. It stopped. 5 seconds later, it started again. Gordon Hale. Then the office line on Ethan's desk rang. Ethan looked at it. It is the main switchboard at Hale Cargo, he said. Let it ring, I said. My cell phone buzzed again. This time, a text message popped up on the lock screen. What is this? Another text. You cannot do this. Another. Answer the phone, Aurora. The phone was dancing on the table now, possessed by his panic, for the first time in his life. Gordon Hale was not commanding the room. He was screaming into the void. I picked up the phone. Ethan looked at me, his hand hovering over his own receiver. Are you going to answer? I looked at the screen. I looked at the name that had governed my fear for 3 decades. No, I said. I am going to let him wait. I pressed the button on the side of the phone and silenced the ringer. I turned to Ethan. Let's go get lunch, I said. "I think I'm finally hungry." We walked out of the room, leaving the phones ringing behind us, a chorus of desperation that sounded, to my ears, like the sweetest music I had ever heard. They say that silence is the loudest sound in the world, but I disagree. The loudest sound in the world is a phone ringing in an empty room when the person on the other end is used to being obeyed. For 12 years, I had been the one waiting. I had waited by the window for a car that never came to pick me up for holidays. I had waited for return calls that never happened. I had waited for acknowledgement, for kindness, for a single scrap of affection to be thrown from the high table of the Hale family. Today, the dynamic inverted. I sat in the temporary executive suite I had rented in downtown Savannah, watching my phone vibrate across the polished mahogany desk. Gordon called 6 times. Serena called 4. Lance called twice, leaving voicemails that transcribed into disjointed strings of panic and threats. I did not answer. I let them sit in the discomfort of the unknown. I let them sweat. I let the silence stretch out until it became a physical weight, pressing down on their chests, making it hard to breathe. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon when Ethan Cole knocked on my door. He looked tense, but there was a grim satisfaction in his eyes. "They are here," Ethan said. "The whole clan. They are in the lobby screaming at the receptionist. They are demanding to see the owner." "Let them up," I said, closing my laptop. "But bring them to the glass conference room and leave the blinds open." "You want an audience?" "I want witnesses," I corrected. "And I want them to know that they are stepping into a fishbowl. People like Gordon only scream when they think they can hide the echoes. He won't make a scene if he thinks the world is watching." I stood up and smoothed my blazer. I checked my reflection in the window. The woman staring back at me was not the girl who had fled in the night with a suitcase full of books. She was the CEO of a multi-million-dollar logistics firm. She was the creditor, and the bill was due. I walked down the hallway. I could see them through the glass walls of Conference Room B before they saw me. They looked like a tableau of a family unraveling. Gordon was pacing, his face a mottled red, his tie loosened as if he were fighting for air. Serena was sitting on the edge of a chair, her posture rigid, clutching her Hermes bag like a shield. Lance was standing by the window, staring out, looking like a child who had broken a vase and was waiting for the punishment. I opened the door. The air in the room shifted instantly. All 3 heads snapped toward me. "You," Gordon snarled. He took a step forward, his finger raised in that familiar, accusatory gesture. "What kind of sick game is this? Aurora? I have been calling you for 4 hours." "I was busy," I said calmly. I did not sit down. I walked to the head of the table and placed my hands on the cool glass surface. "I run a company, Gordon. I do not have time for personal calls during business hours." "You run a company?" Serena let out a high, incredulous laugh. "You run a scam. We got your little letter. Black Harbor? You?" "It is impossible." "Is it?" I asked. "Do not lie to me," Gordon shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "I know who runs Black Harbor. It is a sophisticated operation. It requires math. It requires strategy. You are a waitress. You are a dropout. You expect me to believe you built the system that runs my fleet?" "I do not expect you to believe anything," I said. "I expect you to read." I slid a thin file folder across the table. It stopped perfectly in front of him. "Open it." Gordon stared at the folder. He looked at it as if it might bite him. Slowly, his hand reached out. He flipped the cover open. "That is the certificate of incorporation for Black Harbor Optimization Group," I narrated as he read. "Dated 4 years ago. You will see my name listed as the sole proprietor and majority shareholder. Behind it are the tax returns for the last 3 fiscal years, all signed by me, and behind that is the patent filing for the dynamic routing algorithm your trucks are currently using. My name is on the patent. Dad, not a shell company, me." Gordon flipped through the pages. His eyes scanned the lines of legal text. I watched the blood drain from his face. The red anger was replaced by a pale, gray shock. He was looking at the undeniable proof that the worthless daughter had been the architect of his survival. He dropped the file. He looked up at me, and for the first time, his eyes were not dismissive. They were terrified. "How?" he whispered. "I learned," I said. "While you were buying boats, I was learning code." "This is ridiculous," Serena snapped, unable to process the shift in reality. She stood up, her bracelets jangling. "You do not have a degree. You never finished university. You cannot be a CEO. It is fraud. You are practicing without a license." I turned my gaze to her. It was a cold, level stare that made her take a step back. "There is no license required to be smarter than your competition." "Serena," I said. "And as for my degree, let us be clear about why I did not finish." "You quit," Serena insisted shrilly. "You couldn't handle the pressure." "I was forced out," I said, my voice cutting through her hysteria like a scalpel. "I was told there was no money. I was told the family had to prioritize Lance's education over mine. I didn't drop out. I was evicted from my own future." "We did what we had to do," Lance yelled from the window. He turned around, his face sweaty. "And now you are trying to destroy us for it? You are going to terminate the contract just to get back at us? Do you have any idea what that will do?" "I have a very precise idea," I said. "I ran the simulation this morning." "We have 200 drivers," Lance shouted, trying to sound noble. "We have warehouse staff. If the system goes down, the trucks stop, we lose the clients, those people lose their jobs. Are you going to put 200 families on the street just because Daddy didn't buy you a pony when you were 20? I looked at Lance. I looked at the man who had been given everything: the tuition, the tutors, the job, the title, and had still managed to be mediocre. "Do not use my employees as human shields for your incompetence." "Lance," I said quietly. "Your employees?" Lance scoffed. "They work for Hale Cargo." "They work for a company that you crippled," I countered. "You fired the manual dispatch team 3 years ago to save money. You chose to rely 100% on an automated vendor. You chose to sign a contract with a 30-day termination clause without building a backup plan. That is not my vengeance. Lance, that is your management failure. You built a house of cards and handed me the wind. Do not blame me when it falls." "We are family," Serena cried out, changing tactics instantly. "How can you be so cold? We raised you." "You housed me," I corrected. "There is a difference." Gordon finally spoke. He had been staring at the table, processing the magnitude of his error. He looked up, and I saw him put on the mask. It was the reasonable businessman mask, the one he used when he was trying to close a deal with a hostile client. "Aurora," he said, his voice dropping to a lower, calmer register. "Okay, you made your point. You built something impressive. I admit it. I underestimated you." He stood up and walked around the table. He tried to approach me, but I held up a hand. He stopped. "I am sorry," Gordon said. The words sounded foreign in his mouth, like he was chewing on gravel. "I was hard on you. I pushed you because I wanted you to be tough. And look, it worked. You are a shark. You are just like me." I almost laughed. "I am nothing like you." "We can fix this," Gordon continued. Ignoring my rejection, he gestured to the file on the table. "You want recognition? You got it. We will announce a partnership. Hale and daughter. We will put you on the board. We will tear up the termination letter, sign a 10-year exclusive deal, and I will even give you equity in Hale Cargo. What do you say? Let's keep the money in the family." I looked at him. I looked at the desperation behind the offer. He wasn't apologizing because he felt remorse. He was apologizing because he needed my software. He was trying to buy me with the very thing he had denied me for years, a seat at the table. But he didn't understand. I didn't want a seat at his table. I had built my own table. "You are apologizing because you are scared," I said. "This isn't an apology, Dad. It is a negotiation. You are trying to trade a sorry for a contract. It is a good offer." Aurora, Gordon insisted. Equity. You could be worth millions. I am already worth millions, I said. And I did it without your equity. Then what do you want? Gordon exploded, the mask slipping again. You want me to beg? You want me to crawl? What is the price to turn the computers back on? There is no price, I said. The contract is terminated. The decision is final. You are an ungrateful, vindictive little... Serena started to screech. Stop, I said. My voice was not loud, but it had the weight of absolute authority. Before you say another word about gratitude. Serena, let us talk about accounting. I reached into my briefcase, which was sitting on the chair next to me. I pulled out a second document. It was older, yellowed at the edges. It was a photocopy of a bank ledger I had obtained from the executor of my mother's estate. A document Mara had helped me unearth. I placed it on top of the Black Harbor file. Do you recognize this account number? Gordon? I asked. Gordon looked down. His eyes narrowed. Then, his pupils dilated. He recognized it. That is the educational trust my mother set up for me before she died, I said, my voice shaking slightly for the first time. She deposited $50,000 into it in 1995, with compound interest. By the time I was 20, there should have been enough to cover my entire tuition at any university in the country. The room went dead silent. Lance looked between me and his father, confused. Serena went pale. I found the withdrawal records, I continued. The account was drained, every cent. Do you know when the withdrawals happened? Gordon did not speak. He was staring at the paper as if it were a smoking gun. They happened the year Lance started private high school, I said, and the year you bought the summer house in Charleston, and the year Serena needed that reconstructive surgery in Switzerland. I looked at Serena. She looked away, refusing to meet my eyes. You told me there was no money, I said, my voice rising just a fraction. You sat in that study and told me that times were hard. You told me I had to quit school because the family couldn't afford it. But you didn't just refuse to pay with your money, you stole mine. It was a loan, Gordon stammered. I intended to put it back. The business was in a tight spot. You stole from a dead woman, I said brutally. You stole the one thing she left to ensure I would have a life. You took her legacy, and you spent it on his mediocrity. I pointed at Lance. Lance looked like he was going to be sick. I didn't know. You never asked, I said. That is your crime, Lance. You just took what was given and never asked who paid for it. Gordon slumped into a chair. He looked old. The air of authority was gone. He was just a thief in a tailored suit. We can pay you back, Gordon said weakly. I will write you a check right now, with interest, double the amount. I don't want your money, I said. I have plenty. I walked to the door. I placed my hand on the handle. I looked back at them, the three people who had defined my world for so long, now reduced to three frightened strangers in a glass box. You have 29 days left, I said. I suggest you stop driving to my office and start looking for a map, because on day 30, the screens go black. Aurora, wait! Gordon stood up, reaching out. You can't leave it like this. We are family. No, I said. We are just people who share a last name. And soon, I won't even have that. I opened the door. But before I walked out, I turned back one last time. I had one more card to play. A card I hadn't planned on using, but the sight of their pathetic scrambling made me realize it was necessary. Oh, and Dad? I said softly. He looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. You should know, I said, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that forced them to lean in. Uncle Wyatt called me this morning. Gordon froze. His face went from pale to ghostly white. Wyatt was his estranged brother, the former CFO of the company whom Gordon had pushed out years ago amidst rumors of creative accounting. He saw the news about the contract termination, I said. He was very talkative. He sent me some old email threads. about the pension fund, about the offshore accounts. Gordon gripped the back of the chair. His knuckles were white. "He is flying in tonight," I said. "We are having dinner. I think I'm about to learn the rest of the story." I didn't wait for his response. I stepped out of the room and let the heavy glass door slide shut. Behind me, I could hear Gordon shouting, but the sound was muffled, distant. It sounded like a fish banging against the glass of its tank. Realizing too late that the water was draining away, I walked past my staff. They were pretending to work, but I knew they had seen everything. I didn't care. I walked into my private office and locked the door. I leaned against it, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum. It was done. I had looked them in the eye. I had laid the truth on the table. And for the first time in 32 years, I wasn't the one shaking. Savannah is a city that thrives on secrets, but it is terrible at keeping them. In a town where business is conducted over bourbon and handshake deals on the golf course, the truth has a way of seeping through the cracks like rising tide water. I did not go to the press. I did not call the Savannah Business Journal. I did not leak the termination letter to the gossip columns. I did not have to. The destruction of Gordon Hale's reputation was a self-sustaining reaction. It started with the drivers. Truck drivers are the most efficient communication network in America. They talk on CB radios, they talk at truck stops, and they talk on the loading docks. By Wednesday, 3 days after the party, the story had mutated from a society scandal into a forensic analysis of incompetence. The narrative on the street was simple. Gordon Hale had stood on a stage and humiliated the only person who knew how to run his company. He called her worthless, I heard a man say in a coffee shop near the port, unaware that the woman sitting 2 tables away was the subject of his conversation. And then she turned off the lights. Turns out, she owns the switch. The schadenfreude was palpable. People had resented Gordon's arrogance for decades. Now, they were watching him drown in it. While the rumors swirled, the reality inside Hale Cargo was far worse. My systems at Black Harbor were still running. I was honoring the 30-day window legally required by the contract, but the panic had already set in. The mere knowledge that the safety net was being removed had caused the staff to freeze. I received intelligence reports from my contacts within the industry. The board of directors at Hale Cargo had called an emergency session. Lance had been summoned to answer for his vision. It went poorly, according to a source in the administrative pool. Lance had tried to present a slideshow about synergy and resilience. One of the board members, a man who represented a massive pension fund that held Hale stock, had interrupted him. "We do not need synergy, son," the board member had reportedly said. "We need to know how we are going to move 4,000 shipping containers next month when we lose the routing software. Do you have a replacement vendor?" Lance did not. Gordon had to step in. He tried to unretire himself before his retirement had even officially begun. He stormed into the office, barking orders, trying to revert the company to the manual systems he had used in 1995. But you cannot run a modern logistics fleet on whiteboards and fax machines. The volume was too high. The complexity was too deep. They were bleeding. Meanwhile, at Black Harbor, we were pivoting. I knew that terminating the Hale contract would leave a hole in our revenue, but I had prepared for this. I spent that week in my office, not celebrating, but working. I reached out to the CEO of a rival shipping firm, the man Gordon had been trying to woo at the party. I showed him our capabilities. I showed him that we had capacity opening up in 30 days. He signed within 48 hours. "I always wondered why Hale's trucks were so efficient," the CEO told me as he signed the digital contract. "I thought it was Gordon's genius. I should have known better. Gordon is a salesman. You are an operator." I secured the revenue. My employees' jobs were safe. I had built a firewall around my people so that the flames from my father's burning house would not singe them. Then came the call that changed the texture of the war. It was late Thursday evening. I was in my hotel suite, reviewing the integration plan for the new client. My personal phone rang. The number was unlisted, but the area code was local. I answered. "Aurora Sanders." Sanders, a rough, gravelly voice chuckled on the other end. That is a good name, much better than the one you were born with. I froze. I knew that voice. It was deeper, rougher, and less polished than Gordon's, but it shared the same cadence. Uncle Wyatt? Hello, kid, Wyatt Hale said. I heard you finally grew some teeth. Wyatt was the family ghost. He was Gordon's younger brother. 10 years ago. He had been the CFO of Hale Cargo. Then, suddenly, he was gone. Gordon had told everyone that Wyatt had a drinking problem, that he had embezzled money, that he had to be cut loose to save the company. Wyatt had moved to a cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains and vanished. I'm surprised you have my number, I said, wary. I had not spoken to him since I was 20. I have been watching you, Wyatt said. I saw the patent filing a few years back. Black Harbor, clever name, dark water, deep harbor. I knew it was you. Why are you calling? Wyatt? Do you want to tell me to make peace with him too? Peace? Wyatt laughed, a dry hacking sound. Hell no. I am calling to give you ammunition. I have enough ammunition, I said. The contract is terminated. They are finished. You have a business victory, Wyatt corrected. That is transient. Gordon can spin that. He can blame the market. He can blame you. He can play the victim. You want to finish him? You need the truth, the real truth, not just about the business, but about the money. My grip on the phone tightened. What money? The education fund, Wyatt said. And the rest of it. I know he stole it, I said. I showed him the ledger. You know he took it, Wyatt said. You do not know why, and you do not know where the rest of the bodies are buried. Gordon didn't fire me because I was drinking. Aurora. He fired me because I refused to sign off on the audit. I am listening. I am going to send you a package, Wyatt said. Digital copies. Scans of the original ledgers I kept before he locked me out. And something else. Something Evelyn gave me for safekeeping before she died. She knew you weren't ready for it then. She figured you would be ready when you started fighting back. Why help me now? I asked. You stayed silent for a decade. Because he took my reputation. Just like he took your future, Wyatt said, his voice dropping to a low growl. And because I liked your mother. She was the only decent thing that ever happened to this family. The email arrived 10 minutes later. It was a dense file, encrypted. Wyatt texted me the password. I opened it. The first document was a scanned PDF of a bank transfer from 12 years ago. It showed the withdrawal of $55,000 from the Aurora Hale Educational Trust. The destination account was not Hale Cargo. It was a private account held by a law firm in Atlanta. I scrolled down to Wyatt's notes. The money wasn't used for the business. It was used to settle a liability claim. I read the details. Lance, fresh out of his first year of college, the year he supposedly earned his place, had been involved in a hit-and-run incident in a rental car during spring break. No one was killed, but there was significant property damage and a very angry property owner. Gordon had used my college fund to pay the settlement and seal the record. I felt a cold nausea rise in my throat. I had been told there was no money for my education because the family was struggling. In reality, my future had been liquidated to buy silence for Lance's crimes. My tuition had paid for his impunity, but that was just the appetizer. The second part of the file was a collection of board minutes and private emails between Gordon and a real estate developer. I read them, and my eyes widened. Gordon had been running a scheme that was simpler and dirtier than I imagined. He had purchased 3 warehouses under a shell company listed in the Cayman Islands. Then, as CEO of Hale Cargo, he had signed long-term leases for those warehouses at rates that were 40% above market value. He was leasing buildings from himself, using shareholder money to overpay his own shell company. It was a classic conflict of interest. It was self-dealing. It was fraud. If the board of directors saw this, Gordon wouldn't just be fired, he would be sued. He might even go to prison. "Oh, Dad," I whispered to the empty room. "You were not just incompetent. You were a crook." Then I saw the last attachment. It was an image file. It was a scan of a handwritten note. The stationery was cream-colored with a faint floral border. I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was spidery, elegant, and firm. Evelyn. The note was dated 2 weeks before she died. It was addressed to Wyatt. Wyatt, keep these papers safe. I cannot give them to Aurora yet. She is still too soft. She still loves him. God help her. If she sees this now, it will break her heart. But a day will come when Gordon will try to destroy her. I know my son. He cannot stand to be outshone. If he ever tries to bury her, give her the shovel. Gordon will destroy that girl if he has the chance. Make sure she has the means to bury him first. E. Hale. I stared at the screen. Tears blurred my vision. Hot and stinging. Evelyn had known. She had known everything. She had known about the theft, the fraud, the rot at the center of the family, and she had known that I wasn't ready to handle it. She had protected me by withholding the weapon until I was strong enough to wield it. She had predicted this war, and she had armed me from the grave. I sat there for a long time, the glow of the laptop illuminating my face. The sadness was slowly replaced by a cold, hard resolve. This wasn't just about a contract anymore. This wasn't just about business efficiency. This was about justice. Gordon had not just been a bad father. He had systematically cannibalized the people around him. Me, Wyatt, the shareholders, the employees, to feed his own ego and greed. I picked up my phone and called Mara Whitfield. I need to see you, I said. Tonight. It is 10 o'clock. Aurora, Mara said, sounding sleepy. I have the smoking gun, I said. I have proof of self-dealing. I have proof of embezzlement. I have enough to send Gordon to federal prison. Mara was silent for a moment. Come to the office. I will unlock the side door. I drove to her office through the quiet streets of Savannah. The city felt different now. It didn't feel like a trap. It felt like a stage where the final act was about to be performed. I laid everything out on Mara's desk. Wyatt's files, the bank transfers, the lease agreements. Mara reviewed them in silence. She was a professional. She didn't gasp. She didn't exclaim. She just read. Her eyes moving back and forth, absorbing the catastrophe. Finally, she took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. This is fatal, she said. If you take this to the Securities and Exchange Commission, or even just to the board, Gordon is finished. He will be removed as chairman. He will be sued for breach of fiduciary duty. He will lose his pension. He will lose the house. He will be destitute. She looked at me. And Lance? He is complicit. He signed off on some of these operational budgets. He could go down with him. They did it to themselves, I said. They built the trap. I am just springing it. You are right, Mara said. Legally, morally, you are in the clear. You have the right to burn them to the ground. She leaned forward, her expression serious. But listen to me. Aurora, if you release this publicly, if you go to the authorities, the company goes into receivership, the stock tanks, the accounts are frozen. Those 200 drivers you said you wanted to protect, they will be collateral damage. The company might not survive the scandal. I hesitated. I had not thought about that. A fraud investigation would paralyze Hale Cargo for months. The innocent people, the receptionists, the mechanics, the drivers, would be the ones to suffer while the lawyers fought over the carcass. So what do? I asked. Let him get away with it? Let him negotiate a golden parachute and retire to his boat? No, Mara said. You do not let him get away with anything. But you have a choice. You can be the executioner, or you can be the surgeon. She tapped the file. If you use this privately, you can force a resignation. You can force a restructuring. You can cut out the tumor without killing the patient. She looked deep into my eyes. Evelyn gave you this shovel to bury Gordon, Mara said. But she also told you to build something. If you appear at that board meeting tomorrow, not as a vengeful daughter, but as a major creditor with evidence of malfeasance, you can dictate the terms. You can end this story without making innocent people bleed. I looked at the file. I looked at the handwritten note from my grandmother. Make sure she has the means to bury him first. I had the means. The question was whether I had the mercy. The board meeting is tomorrow at 10, I said. They invited the legal counsel and the major shareholders to discuss the Black Harbor termination. They will be expecting a fight about software, Mara said. They will not be expecting a coroner's inquest. I stood up. I took the file. I won't go to the press, I said, and I won't go to the police. Not yet. You are going to the board, Mara surmised. I am going to the board, I confirmed, and I am going to make Gordon Hale an offer he literally cannot refuse, because the alternative is handcuffs. I walked out into the cool night air. The stars were bright above Savannah. I felt a strange sense of calm. The anger was gone. The hurt was gone. All that was left was the work. Tomorrow, I would walk into the room where my father had been king, and I would show them that the king was not just naked, he was stealing the crown jewels. I was ready to write the ending. The boardroom of Hale Cargo and Freight was designed to intimidate. It was a cavernous space on the 20th floor, lined with portraits of dead men who had built the shipping industry with iron wills and questionable morals. The table was a long slab of polished oak, long enough to land a small plane on. At the head of it sat Gordon Hale. He looked tired. The events of the last 72 hours had etched deep lines around his mouth, but he was still wearing his armor, a navy suit, a silk tie, and an expression of defiant control. Around him sat the board of directors, 6 men and 2 women who represented the money, the shareholders, and the fear. Lance was there, too, sitting to Gordon's right, tapping a pen against a notepad that remained blank. Serena sat in a chair against the wall. Not technically a board member, but refusing to be excluded from the family defense. They were waiting for the legal counsel from Black Harbor to arrive. They expected a lawyer in a cheap suit to walk in and negotiate a settlement. They expected to bully a vendor. They did not expect me. At 10 o'clock sharp, the heavy double doors swung open. I walked in. I was not alone. Flanking me were Mara Whitfield and Ethan Cole. We walked in formation, a phalanx of legal and financial power. I wore a white suit today. It was a deliberate choice. In a room full of dark suits and gray ethics, I wanted to be the blinding light. The conversation in the room died instantly. "Aurora?" Lance blurted out, half standing. "What are you doing here? This is a closed meeting for shareholders and legal counsel." "Sit down." "Lance," I said. My voice was calm, projecting easily across the room without needing to be raised. Gordon narrowed his eyes. "This is not a social call. Aurora, we are in the middle of a crisis. If you are here to gloat, get out. We are waiting for the representatives from Black Harbor." "I know who you are waiting for," I said. I walked to the opposite end of the table, facing Gordon directly. "And you are looking at her." I placed my briefcase on the table and snapped the latches open. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. "I am the legal representative for Black Harbor Optimization Group," I announced, looking at the board members, not my father. "I am also the majority shareholder and the chief executive officer." A murmur of shock rippled through the board. One of the directors, a man named Mr. Henderson, adjusted his glasses. "Miss Hale, you own the vendor?" "My name is Sanders," I corrected him. "Aurora Sanders. And yes, for the past 3 years, my company has been the engine keeping yours afloat." Gordon slammed his hand on the table. "This is a conflict of interest. She is doing this out of spite. She is trying to sabotage the company because of a family dispute." "It is not sabotage," I said, sliding a thick document packet down the center of the table. "It is a performance review, and you have failed." I pressed a button on the room's control panel. The projector screen descended behind Gordon. I plugged in my laptop. A graph appeared. It showed 2 lines. One was blue, trending steadily upward. Hale Cargo's efficiency ratings under Black Harbor's management. The other was red, a jagged, plummeting line showing the financial projection if my systems were removed. "Gentlemen, ladies," I began, addressing the board, You are facing a catastrophic liquidity event. My firm has issued a termination notice. In 29 days, your routing matrix goes dark. Your fuel costs will increase by 40%. Your on-time delivery rate will drop below 60%. You will breach your contracts with your 3 largest clients. We will sue, Lance shouted. We will get an injunction. On what grounds? Mara spoke up for the first time, her voice dry and legalistic. The contract is clear. Clause 17 allows termination without cause. You signed it. Your legal team vetted it. You have no leg to stand on. However, I said, cutting through the legal noise, I am not here to bankrupt this company. I am here to offer a solution. Gordon looked at me, his eyes wide. He thought he saw an opening. He thought I was blinking. A solution? You mean a renewal? No, I said. I mean a transition. I clicked the remote. A new slide appeared. It listed 2 options. Option A, I read. Black Harbor executes the termination. The company collapses. I hand over evidence of gross mismanagement and financial malfeasance to the SEC and your internal audit committee. The stock becomes worthless. The employees lose their jobs. You all lose your investments. Evidence? Mr. Henderson asked sharply. What evidence? Gordon's face went the color of ash. He knew. He remembered the phone call from yesterday. He remembered Uncle Wyatt. Option B, I continued, ignoring the question. Gordon Hale resigns as chairman and CEO, effective immediately. Lance Hale is removed from the succession plan and any executive role. The board appoints an interim CEO. Black Harbor will then agree to a 6-month transition contract to migrate your systems to a new, neutral vendor that I have already vetted and approved. This ensures operational continuity. The drivers keep their jobs. The stock stabilizes. The room was silent. The ultimatum hung in the air, heavy and absolute. You cannot do this, Serena shrieked from the sidelines. She stood up, her face twisted in ugly desperation. We are your family. You are trying to steal the company from your father. After everything we gave you. I turned to her. I looked at the woman who had spent 12 years making me feel small. The woman who had spent my mother's money on her vanity. You gave me nothing but a roof I was afraid to speak under, I said. And as for family, sharing blood does not mean sharing power. You lost the right to call me family when you decided I was an expense to be cut. Gordon, Serena grabbed his arm. Do something. Tell them. But Gordon did not move. He was staring at the screen. He was staring at option A. He knew what was in the files I had brought. He knew about the shell companies. He knew about the warehouse leases. He knew that if I released that information, he wouldn't just be unemployed. He would be an inmate. Gordon? Mr. Henderson asked, his voice low and dangerous. Why is she threatening to go to the SEC? Is there something we need to know? Gordon looked at his board. He looked at the men he had golfed with, the men he had lied to. He realized he had no allies left. He looked at Lance, who was shrinking into his chair, realizing his free ride was over. Then, he looked at me. You planned this, Gordon whispered. For years. I didn't plan to destroy you, I said honestly. I planned to build myself. You just happened to be standing in the way of the truth. I am your father, he said. It was a plea, weak and pathetic. Then act like one, I said. Protect your people. Take the deal. Save the jobs of the 200 drivers you claim to care about. Step down. Gordon closed his eyes. He let out a long, shuddering breath. He knew I had him checkmated. If he fought, he went to prison. If he surrendered, he kept his freedom, but lost his crown. I resign, he croaked. Dad, Lance yelled. No, you can't. Shut up, Lance, Gordon snapped. He looked older than I had ever seen him. It is over. I nodded to Mara. She pulled a document from her briefcase, the resignation papers. They were already drafted. I watched him sign. I watched the pen scratch across the paper. signing away the empire he had built on sand. I watched Lance sign his own resignation, tears of angry frustration streaming down his face. When it was done, the board members looked at me with a mixture of fear and respect. "Ms. Sanders," Mr. Henderson said, "we accept the terms. We will begin the search for a new CEO immediately. We appreciate your mercy regarding the transition period." "One more thing," I said. I clicked the remote one last time. The screen changed. It showed a logo, the Elena Sanders Scholarship Fund. "There was a matter of $55,000, I said, looking directly at Gordon. "Money that was misappropriated from a trust meant for my education. I am not asking for it back." Gordon looked up, confused. "I have already replaced it," I said. "I funded this scholarship with my own capital 2 years ago. It provides full tuition for unprivileged girls in Savannah who want to study logistics and supply chain management, girls who are told they aren't smart enough, girls who are told they should just marry well." I leaned forward, placing my hands on the table. "That is my legacy. Dad, you built a company to buy boats. I built a company to make sure no other girl has to wait for a father's permission to succeed. You can't steal that credit. You can't touch it. It is clean." I picked up my briefcase. "My team will send over the transition protocols by noon," I said. "Good luck, gentlemen." I turned and walked toward the door. "Aurora," Gordon called out. I stopped. I did not turn around. I held the door handle, feeling the cool metal against my palm. "Do you hate me that much?" he asked. His voice was broken. "To humiliate me like this? To take everything?" I thought about it. I thought about the little girl waiting on the stairs. I thought about the teenage girl studying in the dark. I thought about the woman who had scrubbed grease off her hands in a mechanic's bathroom. I turned my head slightly. "I don't hate you, Dad," I said. "Hate takes energy. Hate implies that you still have power over me." I opened the door, letting the light from the hallway spill in. "I just don't need you anymore." I walked out. I walked past Serena, who was weeping into her hands. I walked past Lance, who was staring at the wall. I walked out of the building and into the bright, blinding sunshine of the Savannah street. I took a deep breath. The air tasted sweet. It tasted like magnolia and diesel and freedom. Ethan was waiting by the car. He opened the door for me. "Where to, boss?" he asked. "Back to the office?" "No," I said. "Take me to the airport. I have a business to run in Kansas City, and I have a therapy appointment on Tuesday." "Therapy?" Ethan smiled. "I thought you just won." "I did," I said, getting into the car. "But winning the war doesn't heal the soldier. I have to put myself back together now, and for the first time, I have all the pieces." As the car pulled away, I looked back at the glass tower of Hale Cargo one last time. It was just a building. It wasn't a fortress. It wasn't a prison. It was just steel and glass, shrinking in the rearview mirror until it was gone. I was Aurora Sanders. I was educated by the world. I was worth everything I had built. And I was finally, truly free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening on your commute? At the gym? Or maybe while working late like I used to? Please let me know in the comments below so we can connect. If you enjoyed this journey of justice, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people who need to hear that their worth is defined only by themselves.